Good evening, everyone. On behalf of Birmingham Youth Assistance, I'd like to warmly welcome you to tonight's event, Mindful Resilience for Performance and Mental Health, featuring our incredible speaker, Dr. Christopher Willard. My name is Anna Herbert. I serve as the Family Education Chair and Treasurer at BYA. It's such a pleasure to see this room filled with parents, students, educators, community members. Each of you here because you care deeply about mental health and emotional well-being of our youth. For over 60 years, Birmingham Youth Assistance has been the cornerstone of this community, working to strengthen youth and families to reduce the risk of delinquency, abuse, and neglect. We're a partnership of Oakland County Circuit Court Family Division, the City of Birmingham, the villages of Beverly Hills, Bingham Farms, Franklin, Birmingham Public Schools, and a dedicated team of community volunteers. Our work includes casework services, family education events like this one, community events, camp scholarships for children facing life challenges, recognition of youth in service. This awards program celebrates local middle and high school students who have demonstrated a passion for helping others in our community. Tonight's program is part of BYA's Family Education Series, and we're especially focused this year on providing expert-led programming to help families manage health, emotional well-being, and the challenges of growing up in today's complex world. We know that our kids and teens are facing unprecedented stress, from academics and sports to technology, social media, and more. And tonight, our goal is to give you tools, strategies, and hope. Upcoming BYA events include Breakfast with Santa on December 7th at Townsend Hotel in Birmingham, Kids Dog Show on February 1st, 2026 at Berkshire Middle School, Youth in Service invitation-only event on May 6th, Touch a Truck on May 16 on Bingham Farm Elementary. Flyers are available at our resource table outside of the theater and online. We would love to see you at our future events. Also, please make sure to pick up your book if you haven't picked up yet at our resource table. Tonight is just one of the opportunities to connect with BYA. Please visit our website at www.birminghamyouthassistance.org. Subscribe to our newsletters to stay informed about upcoming events. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook to join conversation and share our resources. You can also volunteer or consider making donations because every bit helps us to reach more families and create more impact. I would like to extend special thanks to Oakland County Youth Assistance for continued support, Birmingham Public Schools and Dr. Robertson for providing this venue and promoting tonight's event. Your partnership means everything to us. All our partners and local municipalities for helping us spread the word. Birmingham Bloomfield Community Coalition for being with us today. They have a resource table outside of the theater, and I encourage to stop by. Their mission is to raise awareness and mobilize the community to prevent abuse of alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs with primary focus on our youth. Bloomfield Community Television for taping tonight's event and continuously supporting us. BPS retiree Mark Hamill, who is here tonight making sure everything behind the scene runs smoothly. And a heartfelt thank you to our amazing BYA volunteers, without who this event would not happen. A little bit about our speaker. Dr. Christopher Willard is a Harvard Medical School lecturer, psychologist, the author of over 20 books, an internationally recognized expert in mindfulness, mental health, and resilience. He's presented in more than 40 countries and is known for making psychological tools practical, engaging, effective, and for families like ours. We're so fortunate to have him with us tonight to share strategies that can help all of us, parents and students, build resilience and strengthen our mental health wellness. Let's get started. Thank you again for showing up and being part of this community that truly supports its youth and families. Please enjoy tonight's keynote. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce you Dr. Christopher Willard.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you, Anna, for doing the work of having me. You emailed me, I don't know, 6 or 8 months ago, asked if I could come out here, and so here I am. I know also the committee has done a lot of work as well, bringing me out here, and also just meeting some of the folks, just hearing a lot about what's happening in terms of the different organizations doing such good, important work for families, important work for the community. So thank you for your work in bringing me here, and thank you also just for the work that you're all doing for the community. So I'm excited to be here. This Venmo does not go to me. I don't know where it goes, but I'll move on. I'm just teasing. I'll give you my Venmo later. No, but it's great to be here. I'm really excited to talk about just what is exciting to me, and I feel particularly passionate about, some of my story about why I'm passionate about this. But it's about how can we build a little bit more resilience, because what we know is that so many of our kids, we've been hearing in the news, we listen to the news, we read the newspaper, we see it in our own families, we hear about it on the sidelines from other parents, that we are in this mental health crisis, right? We're in this epidemic of anxiety, of depression, of substance abuse, of so many other struggles that young folks are having, and that actually a lot of us adults are having, or oftentimes even realizing when we see it in our own kids or families, thinking, oh, that applies to me too. And so we're not actually, I'm a therapist is my day job basically, but we're never actually gonna have enough therapists to help everybody who needs it, unfortunately, despite the incredible work I know some of the caseworkers and folks are doing locally. But we can also think about what are ways that we can kind of build resilience from the bottom up, right? To start when we're young, to start at any age, to find strategies for how we can be more resilient, and so that we can stress-proof ourselves, stress-proof our kids, and then prevent brains from going in those directions towards depression, anxiety, these things that we worry about, self-harm, all these things that we're so concerned about. Whether you're a student and you're thinking about yourself or your friends, or whether you're a parent or a community member, right? How do we kind of come together to find some ways to be as helpful as possible? So I just want to start a little bit with my own story. I talk a lot about this idea of mindfulness, and I'll say what that is. It's really trying to be in the moment. And when I was growing up, I had never particularly heard that word, right? And now it's become a very trendy word in the past few years. But I had these really sweet experiences when I was young of just being in nature, or being with my father, or these other looking up at clouds, that kind of thing, and feeling connected, feeling safe, feeling like a little bit of a sense of calm. And so I grew up with a pretty happy childhood in a community not actually unlike this, relatively well off, pretty high pressure around things like schools, went off to an elite school. And this is a picture of me when I was a little kid that was on the bulletin board in my kitchen for a long time. And then when I was in college, or maybe at some point in high school, my parents had this picture up as well. And it says at the bottom, it says, "What's a nice guy like you doing in a persona like that?" You can see he's like smoking and all of that. And I actually like literally had safety pins in my ears. And I was in college, and I had a few years in college, and I really started to fall apart. I was struggling with anxiety, I was struggling with depression, I was struggling a lot with substance abuse, and didn't know what to do. And my parents, I felt very lucky because they had some resources. My mom herself was a mental health professional and was able to get me some of the help that I needed. For me, it actually took me 2 years off from college to find myself or get my act together, however you want to put that, before I was then able to go back to college, and I've now been much happier since that time. I've actually been clean and sober for a couple of decades of my life at this point. Thank you. I appreciate that. And it's given me this kind of interest in how can I help young people. So I worked as a special ed teacher for a couple of years, and then went back to school to become a clinical psychologist, and now these days I'm those things, that I'm an author, and I come to Michigan and speak, and I travel, and I do many things. I'm also a father, is a big part of my job. Maybe I'll share a couple stories about my own kids who are 7 and 11. But what I've seen over the years is that kids are so stressed out. When I was growing up, I never heard that word stress either. I don't know when I first heard that, maybe 8th or 9th grade. And now I hear kids as young as, 2nd, 3rd grade throwing that word around. I hear so many kids actually around the world talking about mental health issues. This isn't just an American phenomenon, but it's everywhere. And in fact, the American Psychological Association, they did a study maybe 15 years ago to try to see who is the most stressed out group in America. Anyone want to guess who that is? Teenagers, yeah. So you can, if you are a teenager, you can tell your parents, I told you so, basically, and tell them to give you a break. But it's incredibly stressful. I had one of my students who I work with at a university. She sent me this meme many years ago, and you can see it says, pick two, right? You can have studying and sleep, but then you've got no friends. You can have sleep and a social life, but you're probably failing your classes. You can get your studying done and have a social life, but you're probably getting no sleep, and doing all of these is impossible, right? And this is like, a very simple thing. We think about how much more young people are faced with besides just those things. It's extracurriculars and college applications and mental health and school violence and all of these other things that are on our minds and on our hearts, and the parents are worrying about their kids, and we're worrying, I'm not a kid anymore, right? But kids are worrying about each other, right? And we are so stressed out. And I want to talk about how stress actually impacts us and affects our mental health. Because as human beings, we've been evolving for centuries, millennia, with this stress response that can be really helpful in some situations and not so helpful in others. We respond to stress the same way our cave people ancestors did thousands of years ago when they're getting chased by a tiger. And what do you want to do if there's a tiger chasing you? Yeah, you want to run away. This isn't that hard a class, right? You do want to run away from the tiger. I was in Texas, though, a few months ago, and they're like, you shoot the tiger. I was like, I'm from Massachusetts, right? Little different, right? So maybe you want to run away from the tiger, right? You start running, and then you get, kind of tired, right? And you sort of slump over like this, right? And so what I want to walk us through is actually a little bit of that. So start by holding your hands out like this. And then make actually really tight fists, and notice what happens when you make those tight fists. What happens to your body? What happens to your breath? And how well can you think right now? How well could you do in the SATs right now, or do an interview or something? And just notice that, and then just let go. And then if you like, you can kind of crumple over in your seat, which is maybe how you feel when your parents dragged you to this thing on Thursday night or whatever. But again, noticing your body and your breath. Do you feel awake or kind of asleep? If you're feeling like this, how well would, lacrosse tryouts go or something? If your body's like this. And then just sitting up, kind of a bit more in the middle, just palms up like this. And asking yourself these questions again: your body, your breath. Are you feeling awake, asleep, open or closed? And if you like, you can just put one hand over your heart and just rest it there for a moment and notice a shift. And what I'm inviting us to do, you can set your hands down, is explore the different ways that we respond to stress, right? Like that tiger's chasing us. And so this is that fight or flight response. The body tenses up, right? It doesn't feel great. Our breath gets kind of like short and shallow, right? And so we want to, flee and run away from the tiger, or we're brave or we're stupid. We try to fight the tiger, but our body clenches up. And we still have that same response when it's like there's a teacher saying there's a test due, or the SAT scores are coming out, or there's some drama about the big dance coming up, or will I make the team, or will I make the musical, right, or whatever it might be. We often go into that same fight or flight response. We also, if the tiger's chasing us, we can kind of play dead, become camouflaged, like wait for the attack to be over like this. And that's also, again, it's helpful with a tiger chasing you, but you can't just kind of like hide and avoid everything. This is called more the freeze and faint response, or freeze and forget it response, that kind of thing. And so that's not actually all that helpful either. We can't hide from our teachers or tests or things like that. And what starts to happen over time, how this relates to mental health, is that if you go into fight all the time, which we're wired to do, then we tend to get a little bit more aggressive and angry and aggro. Or if you go a little bit more into flight and you just run away from things, what actually happens when we avoid things is that our anxiety actually gets worse, right? And this is actually a real problem in schools and different places. And I think for a lot of parents, it's a real struggle, right? How much do I push my child or not, right? But when we avoid things too much, anxiety gets worse. And 1 in 3 teenagers now has an anxiety disorder. And so if you're a teenager here and you think about a couple of your friends, right? Maybe it's you, maybe it's not you, but one of them actually probably is struggling with panic, with anxiety, social anxiety, some kind of anxiety that's really preventing them from living their full life. We also, as I mentioned, right, we have more of like this, and this is sort of like a trauma response, or even just kind of like giving up and turning into like depression or avoidance, isolation, that kind of thing. And so these stress responses, they turn into more aggression and bullying. They turn into more anxiety and avoidance. They turn into just like withdrawing, kind of, maybe a different F word besides forget it that we might kind of think, right? But that kind of thing where we're kind of withdrawing a little bit and becoming more depressed, right? So these are the ways that stress ends up impacting us. And it impacts our brains too. The brain's kind of parts that work most for school, the prefrontal cortex, where we pay attention and think things through, that actually shuts off when we're stressed out. It's why you go in for the test and your brain just shuts down. You can't remember anything if you're too stressed out. We also have the sides of our brain. This is called the insular cortex. There won't be a test on this. That's where like our socializing, our relationships, right, that kind of thing exists in there. And that shuts off, and we actually can't take other people's perspective when we're stressed out. That's why we get grumpy and irritable and things like that when we're super stressed. And everyone and everything looks like a threat. Right? My nice teacher, right, they're just trying to ruin my life. Right? My parents are out to get me. Right? My friends are talking about me behind my back. All of these negative things start to happen when we get stressed out in terms of our brain, in terms of our mood, and in terms of our mental health, in our ability to focus, and all of that. Even our ability to manage our impulses shuts down. Because if there's a tiger chasing you, right, you just want to react. You don't want to kind of take the time to think through what the next best thing to do is. Other things happen too. Our breath gets kind of short and shallow. Even when we're like this, our breath is actually kind of, it's slow, but it's shallow. Right? That changes. Heart rate changes. We actually crave different foods when we're stressed out, because if you're running away from a tiger, you're actually craving sugar and fat and salt and things like that for energy. And so that's partly why we stress eat, because we think we need to. Our bodies are telling us to. We don't feel safe. And so all of these things then add up to create all kinds of mental health issues down the road. Right, which is some of what happened to me. The other kind of avoidance strategy I had besides anxiety and depression was falling into addiction and substance abuse. Right, so I didn't have to feel any of those unpleasant feelings. The good news, though, is that we have these other ways we can respond. We call it the attend and befriend, or mindfulness and compassion responses, and they shut off that fight or flight, freeze and forget it response. And the brain actually starts working. So blood actually then flows into these outer parts of the brain where we can think things through and we can manage our impulses and make better choices like our parents always tell us to do, right? We can start to socialize and feel more confident socially, understanding where people are coming from. On the sides of the brain, that starts working. And this part of the brain called the amygdala, which is like the brain's alarm system, right? I had a friend of mine said, you can remember the amygdala because it rhymes with drama, which it doesn't, but I don't know why he said that. But it kind of helps me remember it. But that part of the brain, the alarm system, well, none of us can focus when there's an alarm going off. But when we're able to calm ourselves and get into that kind of more mindfulness place, right, that amygdala, the alarm system, it starts to get a little bit quieter. And our breath evens out and all these other things actually start to happen in positive ways. And so our friendships get better, our mental health gets better, our ability to focus in school gets better. All of these things start to change a bit more for the positive. When we don't actually learn how to then manage our emotions, manage our stress, other things start to happen, and we end up in this mental health crisis. So I brought with me, and I hope folks got to get a copy of one of my new books called College Mental Health 101, but I wrote it for students and parents, whether they're going off to college or already in college, who have questions about mental health. Because so many young people, especially in communities like this, where I speak all over the country, unbelievably well prepared academically to go off to great schools, but then often getting there and being overwhelmed emotionally and not quite as prepared and resilient in terms of mental health. And then we see, I kind of call this the horror story, horror movie slide of some of the scary statistics that are out there. Now, I do share this slide, but the reality about mental health and mental illness is that it's incredibly treatable. And a lot of, actually, there's medications that are helpful, but actually talk therapy has been shown to be just as helpful as medications. Just counseling, just talking about what's going on can change the shape and structure of people's brains so that they're not actually struggling with anxiety, with depression, with compulsions and addictions and these other kinds of things that we worry about our friends, we worry about our kids, we worry about each other. And so to me, I think, hopefully we can find ways to more effectively manage our mental health, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But I also just want to say a word to the parents and caregivers, right, which is that a lot of this also starts with you and challenging you as well to manage your stress. I saw this online a few years ago. It says, never in the history of calming down has anyone ever calmed down by being told to calm down, right? I tried it when I was a teacher many years ago. If I used this as a therapist, I'd be like the best therapist in the world. It's like, oh, you have anxiety? Just calm down, right? Boom, right? One session, everyone's cured, right? Tried it with my daughter yesterday, really didn't work, right? The way that we actually calm down and help other people calm down, right, is we have this thing, actually, emotions are contagious. You've probably noticed this in your life, right? Someone comes home grumpy, right? Everyone's kind of on edge. Someone comes home in a good mood, or the teacher walks into the class in a good mood, everyone kind of relaxes and exhales, right? So what is it that we're doing, and especially that you're doing as adults, caregivers, educators, right, to manage your stress? Because actually your ability to stay calm through especially challenging teenage years is the number one thing that you can do, right, for your child, is to be as present as possible for them, to not give up. Actually, that was the advice my parents got from some fancy psychiatrist they went to see when I was sleeping in a park when I was 19 years old, is that the guy just said, never give up, the number one rule of parenting, right? So when we're able to stay calm and take care of ourselves and the oxygen mask and all of that, right, we can actually help everybody. Our emotions are incredibly contagious. And so when I go and I talk to parents in particular, and I do workshops at schools for educators, they always say, well, how do we create these more mindful, compassionate kids? And I thought, well, I know how to do the opposite. If you want stressed out, miserable kids, you just surround them with stressed out, miserable adults, right? But if you do want more mindful, compassionate, happy kids, you just surround them with more mindful, compassionate, happy adults. And so we really are all in this together. It really is your work, two parents, right, to do the work that you need to do on your mental health and your stress and your health, right? Because you're not just modeling that for your kids, that's actually contagious and infects them. It's the best possible thing you can do. So I'm getting to this kind of mindfulness thing and different strategies, what did you notice when I had you go like this? What happened to your breath? Right? It got kind of hard to breathe. And so probably we've heard people say, oh, take a deep breath, right? But the reality is that breathing really does make a difference in our physiology, right? Researchers have looked at this, but the fact is when you regulate your breath, you're actually regulating your whole body, your nervous system, and you're regulating your brain, and you're then able to regulate your attention, your impulses, and your emotions. Right? Which is what I think as an adult I really want for myself, right? But the ability also to pass on to my own kids, the ability to regulate their attention, right? When they're struggling with that, their emotions, their impulses is what I hope for most of all, that I can really give them. So what does this really mean? And the scientists have actually found that when we slow our breath down to about 5 or 6 breaths in a minute, that actually, it's like it hits the reset button. We actually have different nerve endings in the top of our lungs than the bottom. So if you breathe short and shallow, right, you'll make yourself anxious or get yourself worked up for a fight or a game or something. But if you're overwhelmed, you want to slow your breath down slowly and deeply. And it's like then the oxygen hits the nerve endings at the bottom of our lungs. That's like where the reset button is, that actually changes our nervous system, that activates those outer parts of our brain where we do our thinking, where we do our socializing, our emotions, all of that. So that, to me, is actually can be really helpful and powerful, and very portable too. Just learning how to regulate our breath. We see athletes doing this. We see peak performers doing this all the time to kind of not totally get rid of their stress, but have just that right amount of stress where it's not overwhelming, but it's also not putting them to sleep or something. Now, my son, a few years ago, I was writing a book about breathing, and he said, Dad, breathing is boring. I'm never breathing again. And I was like, oh boy, right? So the good news is he was breathing when I left this morning, right? But we have to make breathing a little bit more interesting, and how do we remember it? And so there's different things that we can do, whether we're adults or kids, right? But even just slowing down and counting our breath, like breathing in as we count to 7, back out to 11, and as I mentioned, so many athletes using these kinds of practices. You can just try this with me, breathing in, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, back out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Breathing in, counting up to 7. And back out to 11. In up to 7. And back out to 11. It actually does hit that reset button and helps us to calm down. It actually very literally sends blood into that part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex behind your forehead, where you focus and think things through. A few 7-11 breaths can actually stop a panic attack, whether that's you or whether it's a friend who's feeling overwhelmed. A few 7-11 breaths before an exam can actually send blood to the parts of your brain where you remember things, where you focus, so that, we've all had that experience where you look at the question, your mind just goes blank and you freeze. Okay, a couple breaths. Actually, it's sending blood back into those parts of the brain that are so important for learning, or important for feeling calm at the party or the difficult moment that you're facing in your life. So that's just one way of breathing. Another one I learned that no one has to notice that you're doing, but just putting your hands behind your head like this, which a lot of us do without realizing. It's very hard to not breathe slowly and to not breathe deeply when you do this, whether it's every couple questions on the exam, just leaning back and doing this, or feeling a little bit awkward in a social situation, right? And it just helps us again, to reset. Slow the breath down. There's other things that we do automatically, too, without realizing it, like sighing. Sighing is actually an extended exhale, right? When we're frustrated, annoyed, we're like, ugh, right? And I'm not going to stereotype about teenagers. I'll just say my own kids, right? They sigh at me when they're annoyed. They're like, ugh, Dad, you're so annoying, right? I'm like, okay, guys, that's fine. But just maybe like do like, I call it like the silent sigh, right? So it's a little passive aggressive. I'm not going to get annoyed as your dad, right? But just take a breath in. And then just like a nice long silent sigh. Slowly, oh my gosh, Dad, you're so annoying, right? But out to the bottom of your breath. That also hits that reset button. So these ways to just slow our breath down for younger kids, if you've got younger kids back at home or something, other just, cute little things like, it's going to get cold here in Michigan soon, right? I'm from Boston, but it's like breathe in like you're smelling the hot chocolate and just blowing out like you're cooling it off. My daughter, who's 7, right, she's able to do that. She's been able to do that since she was like 3 or 4. And we learn how then to regulate our breath, which regulates our body, which regulates our brain and our emotions, our attention, and our impulses. So breathing is one thing that we can do, but mindfulness in general, there's more to it than just breathing. And I'll share a few more ideas, and there's so many definitions of this mindfulness thing out there, but they all have these 3 parts, right? Something about paying attention. Who here has ever yelled at their kids to pay attention, right? You can see which parents are lying, right? Okay, parents, which of you have ever taught your kids how to pay attention? Right? Couple of hands going up. All right, all right. But often we're telling our kids to do something, right, and not even teaching them how, right? And if you've got ADHD like my son, or if you've got anxiety like my daughter, right, it's really hard to pay attention. So learning how to pay attention is really important. And then we're trying to pay attention to the here and now, and with acceptance and non-judgment and all of that. But let me just get into this idea of paying attention, right? So it starts by just, we all think that we can multitask, right? And that ends up actually stressing us out even more when we're like driving and listening to the radio and the podcast and texting and, eating our food, all that at the same time, right? We're actually just switching things all the time, and we actually wear our brains out and make ourselves grumpy. So I'll just sometimes talk about, rather than multitasking, what about just like single tasking? Just focusing on like one thing at a time, basically. And so one way to kind of gather your attention is, if you like, you can just put a finger in the center of your forehead like this, even if it feels a little bit goofy, or just a hand on your cheek or something. But just tune into the sensations, noticing what does your finger feel like against your forehead, and also what does your forehead feel like against your finger. What's the temperature of your finger, or the temperature of your forehead? Texture on your forehead or on your finger. Moisture, pressure on your finger, on your forehead. And you can just set your hands back down again. But just noticing, even in like 30 seconds, just tuning into sensations and kind of single tasking, we feel a little bit calmer. Right? I feel a little calmer up here. The room feels a little bit calmer to me from up here, and a little bit more settled, and a little bit more focused in. So gathering our attention, right, maybe before homework or another moment, right, can be really helpful, right? Even before, sitting before a test or something like that, right? Taking a moment just to check in with sensations. Because our senses are actually really powerful in terms of bringing us into the present moment. Right, I mentioned this thing about the here and now in the present moment, and actually some colleagues of mine at Harvard did a study where they texted people on their phone 3 times a day, And they asked 3 questions. What are you doing? How focused or how present are you right now? And how happy are you? And they wanted to know the answers to these questions. And the first thing they found was that your mind wanders really a lot. Anyone want to guess how much time the average mind wanders? Yeah, no one wants to guess, right? They're all like, oh, no, I don't know, I'll get my shoes. Right, but your average mind wanders about 48% of the time. Not that bad, right? But I should repeat that because half of you missed what I said, right? So your mind wanders half the time. And where it goes is it goes to the future. And if you're a little bit stressed out and you think about the future, you think, oh my gosh, it's Thursday. And the teacher said there's a test coming up next Monday, and I'm probably going to fail the test, and I'm going to fail it at school, and then like I'll never get a job. My parents will disown me. I'll die alone under a bridge. And I'll look at my funeral, right? Like that whole horror story about the future. But if I can kind of come back to the present, it's like, okay, there's a test on Monday. I'll write it in my assignment book. I'll send an email to the teacher and see if they can meet with me. I'll check in with my friends and we'll work on a study plan together, right? And keeping it a little bit more in the moment, right? Or if you're a little bit depressed, right? You're often going to the past, right? Why did this difficult thing happen? Or why did I say that thing at the party? I'm so embarrassed about that. Or why did I put that answer down on the test, right? In the last period, right? Regretting, right? The future, worry, right? The past, kind of depression, right? The present. It's kind of a happier place to be oftentimes. But how do we get there, right, when our thoughts are racing to the past or the future, right? Well, getting into our senses can be really helpful. And so again, just a few little ideas about this, but I have this longer practice, but I'll just guide us through maybe a shorter one. For me, just taking a moment to even notice sounds around us is a way that I really like to get into the present and focus a little bit better. So I brought this like bell with me, and we'll just take maybe about a minute, maybe a minute and a half. And you can have your eyes open or closed, but I'll ring the bell and just see if you can listen to the beginning, middle, and end sound of the bell. And then when it fades, just continuing to listen, maybe noticing sounds from the left, or sounds from the right, even in the quiet room. Sounds from behind you, in front of you. Maybe even listening, what's the farthest away sound you can hear? Can you hear steps or voices out in the hallway? And then coming a little bit closer in, maybe noticing sounds in the room, the rattling of the heating. A little closer, creaking of the chairs. Sound of your own breath. Maybe even inside your body, can you hear your heartbeat or pulse, stomach growling? Can you hear the sound of your own thoughts? Is that even possible? And I'll just ring the bell again and again, just listening to the sound of the bell as it fades. To the beginning, middle, and end. And you can just bring your awareness, your attention to the rest of your senses. And again, we've just taken a moment to slow down. And probably some thoughts like, what is this? Why are we doing this? But maybe your thoughts also slow down a little bit by just bringing them into your senses. Right? And so whether it's a difficult moment and you're trying to focus in class, right? Maybe you're thinking about, what are the voices in the hallway, right? Who's out there, right? What could be going on? What am I missing, right? And then just starting to bring your attention in, almost like you're zooming in to what's happening in yourself. Bring your awareness back in and maybe onto what the person in front of you is saying or something like that. or out on the sports field, lacrosse, soccer, basketball, right? I don't know, but whatever it is, right? It's like trying to get, I remember the teachers or the coaches always yelling, right, get your head in the game. Right? I was a little spacey as a kid. I wasn't much of an athlete, right? But just having that moment to notice, okay, sounds from the left. I hear people cheering. I hear the wind from the right. I hear, the ball dribbling in front of me. I hear people yelling behind me, right? Pretty quickly, I'm a little bit more focused with my head in the game, which is why so many athletes actually are using practices like mindfulness and breathing and awareness for, they call it actually mental fitness training, mental resilience training. Anyone can be fast, right? You can go to the gym and work out and make yourself strong, right? But when it comes down to the game, right, on the court or on the field, right, you have to be able to control this muscle between your ears, right? So it's not telling you, you're about to screw it up, don't do that, don't do this, right? Racing thoughts, right? You need that to quiet down just enough so you can be in the zone, you can really be in the game. And that again is where whether it's breathing or awareness or checking in with our senses can be really helpful. So paying attention, right? We did this little exercise, paying attention to the moment, to the here and now, maybe using sounds or our other senses. And then this thing about non-judgment and acceptance, which to me means a few things. It's a little bit like that bumper sticker that says, don't believe everything you think. Because I learned recently that we have like 85,000 thoughts a day. I don't know how they counted those. Someone's like, click, 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 right? But we have 85,000 thoughts a day. Most of those are not very helpful. A lot of those are very negative. But we generally end up believing them even when they're not true. And so I brought with me, like a snow globe. It's just a jar with glitter in the bottom that they were very curious about at TSA this morning, I have to say. Right? I actually was going through TSA once, and the guy was like, what is that? And I was like, it's a jar with glitter. He's like, can you drink it? I was like, I could. I don't know if you want to know what happens out the other side. But anyway, the glitter in the jar kind of represents our thoughts. Right? The jar itself represents our mind. And we start out the day oftentimes pretty clear, right? Things look pretty clear. But then stressful things happen, right? Running late for the bus, oh my gosh, right? Lots of thoughts, feelings swirling around, right? Get to school, running late, oh my gosh, there's a test coming up on Monday, are you kidding me, I didn't study, right? Thoughts and feelings, right? Something good happens, oh, I made the team. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited about it. Thoughts and feelings, and pretty soon it's very hard to see clearly. 85,000 thoughts and feelings, all pretty negative, and we believe them, then we get in big trouble. Believing those negative thoughts about ourselves and the world, that's what makes us depressed. Believing those horror stories about the future, that's what anxiety is. Thinking, that's too scary, I can't do it. I heard someone say, anxiety is the overestimation of a danger, right? This test will ruin my life, right? With the underestimation of our ability to deal with it. I'll never be able to pass the test. Right? So how do we get that glitter to settle? Right? Well, we have to slow down. We have to become still. Right? Take that 3 breaths, take that moment to notice 5 sounds or 5 sensations, and our bodies start to calm down and our brains start to focus a little bit. And there's other things that we can do to help ourselves not believe all those negative thoughts. Right? Sometimes when I'm working with kids as a therapist, or when I was a teacher, I'd actually do this too. But we all have those negative thoughts, right? So just think about what's your top 10 list. Like we all get the Spotify Wrapped. What were your top 10, songs of the year? What were your top 10 negative thoughts of the year that you kept having? Right? I can't learn Spanish. Or I'm always saying I can't learn the subjunctive. I'm actually still taking Spanish lessons even at my age. Can't make the team. Can't make friends at this new school, right? Writing some of those down, and when you hear yourself say that, or better yet, if you have a friend that can help you, or maybe a parent, right, or someone else in your life, you hear someone else say, I can't, I can't, I can't, right? You can actually play with that a little bit and see whether it's true, or just remind yourself that's just a thought, right? It sounds so small, but it's so helpful to remind people you're just having the thought that you'll never get into college. You're just having the thought that you'll never learn the subjunctive. You're having the thought that you'll never make the team. Maybe it's true. Maybe you'll never make the team. Maybe you'll never get into college. But right now, that's stinking thinking, or in psychology, we call it cognitive distortions, black and white thinking, catastrophizing, the worst is going to happen. Maybe it's true, but what if it's maybe not true? Just, reminding you to not believe all your own thoughts. When I learned that I didn't have to believe my thoughts, that was so helpful for me, right? Just to see, I don't have to believe it. Or even probably some students might know this from classes that you've had too, but that word yet, right, can be really helpful to get out of what we call fixed mindset into growth mindset. Right? Maybe back in elementary school you did this, but it's still really helpful in our life, right? I can't make friends at the new school or at college, or you can't make friends yet. A mom just called me when I was actually in the Uber up to my hotel today. My son is in college. He can't make friends. He's miserable. He's an athlete. He's at this really artsy school. Like he's so unhappy. He just thinks he's never going to make friends. Right? Trying to help him remember that he just hasn't made those friends yet. Right? Or I can't learn Spanish yet. Or I can't manage my temper, manage my attention yet. Right? Maybe it's true, maybe it's not true. Right? But actually with practice, we probably can. So to me, that's a lot of what mindfulness is. It's paying attention to the here and now with acceptance and non-judgment. Right? Not believing everything that we think. And I think pictures are sometimes helpful too. Right? How to be a little bit more like the dog, where we're actually seeing and appreciating the sunshine in the trees. Right? But unfortunately, most days on Friday afternoons, we're out taking a walk with the dog, and right, we're just thinking about the beautiful Detroit traffic I got to experience today. Right? The bills piling up, the public speaking, I guess I should worry about that. Right? And not even seeing the sunshine in the trees. Right? And we're human beings, we're not dogs. We have to deal with the Detroit traffic. We have to deal with the bills piling up, right? Or the college acceptance letters coming in. But we get stuck like that. Right? And so how do we just get back a little bit to that? Because the more we practice, actually what happens is that we change our brains. So our brains are actually like a muscle. We probably all agree, if you go to the gym and you work out with enough resistance, biceps and triceps get activated and they get bigger. And the same is actually true with our brains. When you work out your brain, when you work out the math part of your brain, the math part of your brain gets bigger. When you work out and speak and talk, the language part of your brain gets bigger. Right? And also you can work out with mindfulness and focusing, right? You can actually make those parts of your brain bigger. When you practice mindfulness, the part of the brain associated with attention starts to get bigger. The parts of the brain associated with kind of socializing, social intelligence, emotional intelligence, that part of the brain actually gets bigger, right? Even with just a little bit of practice, right? Or you can actually wire your brain to make yourself more miserable, right? And more unhappy with more mental health issues and more focusing difficulties. But when we practice with our brains, the neurons that fire together wire together, and those parts of the brain actually start to get bigger. Right? That part up here where we focus and pay attention and deal with our impulses starts to grow. The sides where, again, we have our social reasoning and stuff like that starts to grow. And the amygdala, that kind of inner caveman, the alarm system, that actually starts to get a little bit less active, so that the alarm doesn't go off just because the teacher says there's a test coming up. The alarm doesn't go off just when it says, okay, it's college admissions acceptance day, or it's, the play tryouts are posted in the call sheet, or, did everyone make varsity who made it, and we go into panic. Don't have to go into panic about all those things. It's amazing when you don't have to go into panic about those things. So we can wire our brains again for more stress, more misery, right, by keeping on doing what we always do. Or we can start to actually wire them for more resilience, so that their brains are bigger, and stressful things and disappointments and breakups and bad grades, or even traumatic things actually can bounce off of us and don't lead to more depression, don't lead to more anxiety and coping with it with self-harm and addiction and substances and things like that, we can actually make our brain stronger, make ourselves happier, more connected for relationships, better for learning and focusing, make ourselves smarter even. So these are just a few ideas. And there's other ways that we can use some of these practices. I know I used to get terrified of public speaking, right? It's kind of like public speaking. It's like there's a bunch of, like a bunch of hyenas that wants to eat me up here on stage. And if I can just calm myself down, I can see, okay, it's a bunch of parents and kids. Maybe they're a little bored, right? But they're okay. They're not going to eat me. And public speaking is something in performing in sports or on stage. This is another place where a lot of us get overwhelmed. And for me, what I try to do, you can try this with me even just sitting, but a friend said, you know what, Chris, if the worry's up in your head, right, what's the farthest place from your head? And I was like, my feet, and she's like, yeah, well, just take a breath in and just bring your attention down into your feet. If you're nervous up on stage, right, is the ground underneath you hard or soft on the stage? Are your feet warm or cool? Are your shoes tight? Are they loose? Are your feet sweaty? Are they dry? Just take a moment to notice. And in 20 or 30 seconds of focusing on my feet, I'm not focused on, oh my gosh, they hate me here. I'm going to get banned from the state of Detroit, right? Or the state of Michigan. They're never going to let me back into the whole state. I did such a terrible job in this presentation, right? It's like, okay, no, I'm just in the moment, right? Not worried about the future. So just taking that moment to feel our feet can be helpful. Or relaxing different parts of our body when we're stressed out too. A good way, I know a lot of us struggle with getting to sleep, right? When your body is stressed out, your mind is stressed out. But if your body is relaxed, it's very hard to have a stressed out mind with a relaxed body. And so very deliberately, on purpose, you can relax your body. You can take a moment, right, and tense the muscles in your chest. Just squeeze the muscles there and let go. And to A for your arms, just again like tensing, clenching the muscles in your arms, shoulders even. And then let the relaxation flow in. Into your legs, just squeezing those muscles. Sometimes our legs are bouncing when we're nervous. Just squeeze the muscles and release. And then lastly, your mouth, just is a place I tend to clench my jaw when I'm stressed. Just clench it on purpose, and then let go. And you're actually deliberately relaxing these different parts of your body. So a moment of tension or before bed, this kind of thing can be helpful with settling your body, because again, you can't have a stressed mind with a relaxed body. It's very hard. So there's so much research on this these days. There's actually, as I mentioned, so many people practicing mindfulness and these kinds of things. So many professional athletes using mindfulness, performers who have to get up on stage. So many different kinds of people trying to use breathing, use mindfulness to not get rid of their stress altogether, but have the right amount of stress to meet the moment, to not fall asleep on the test, not fall asleep on the court, but be awake enough and alert enough, but also not so tense that everything starts to fall apart too. So just kind of winding up, right, there's so many people practicing. This can be so helpful, right? It's simple, it's cheap and portable. You can, when you're off to college that first day, whether you're being dropped off or whether you're dropping your own kids off, right, and having that moment of panic, right, to take just a moment and take a few breaths. Or feel your feet, or count to 5 sounds around you. In fact, I remember when I was growing up, there was some commercial on TV that was like, if you're ever angry, just count to 5 and you'll feel better. And my friends and I would be like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I'm still mad, right? But then I realized, well, maybe just count to 5 breaths, or count to 5 sounds, right? The speaker, the white noise, the projector, the rattle of the fan, the steps in the hallway. Right? Pretty soon I'm settled. Notice 5 sensations in my feet, and I'm settled. Right? So it doesn't have to take that much time. You can find these little moments, maybe first thing in the morning. Maybe it's walking to class. Right? Maybe it's waiting in line in the cafeteria or something like that. Maybe it's waiting for the elevator or to cross the street, right? You can just like pick up your phone and probably stress yourself out even more with some doom scrolling, right? Or just sort of like feeling jealous and resentful of everybody else. Or you can take a moment and just, right, pause, right? Take a moment to relax your body and then go ahead and pick up your phone, right? But finding these little moments, but especially I think that good reminder, as it says, right? Anytime you feel that urge to pick up your phone, that's a moment you can actually check in with yourself, right? Before you kind of check out with your phone and screens and stuff like that. So these little moments, right? Seeing a stop sign and just take a pause to just stop, take a breath, observe, and proceed. Or on your walk or drive to school, just notice one beautiful thing, right? Notice one new thing that you hadn't noticed in the drive yesterday. Actually, that kind of provokes curiosity in the brain, which you need for school. Curiosity, a friend of mine, Judd Brewer, he's been doing this research. Curiosity shuts off anxiety. It's very hard to be anxious and curious at the same time. He's even actually got this hack. If you're feeling anxious, you just open your eyes a little bit wider, like you're curious about something, and it actually, even just that, as silly as it sounds, can settle down some of your anxiety. So another little tip. Right? Noticing that same tree, especially as we go into fall, how it changes every day. Or listening to music a little bit more mindfully. Just put in headphones instead of like breathing for 5 minutes before your homework. Put in your headphones, pick your favorite song, and just sort of focus on one instrument. Focusing on the guitar, and your mind goes off to the piano, right? Bring it back to the guitar. It's a really good workout for your brain that strengthens those emotional regulation parts of the brain, the focusing parts of the brain, all those things that you want, the social intelligence parts of the brain, right? For school, for fun, helps all of that. So I'll just kind of close there with just a reminder that you can just slow down too and just really do one thing at a time. I saw this meme online recently too also. It says, there's this guy at the coffee shop sitting at a table, not on a laptop, not on his phone, just drinking his coffee like a psychopath, right? I'm from Boston, there's the one guy at the Dunkin' Donuts, right? But it's like, just take that moment, right? Close the laptop, just take a sip of your coffee. I've got a father I work with. Actually, I was Zooming with him today. He's got a really challenging, really stressful home life. He's got a really stressful job, right? General counsel at a big company, at a startup, right? He goes home. He's got a special needs kid who's really has a difficult time regulating. And I said, what's the most helpful thing that you learned in therapy? And he was like, Chris, like I would drive home as fast as possible, park in my driveway, and just take 3 breaths in the driveway, feeling each breath in, feeling each breath out. And then get out of my car and walk into the house. And I'm not always bringing calm into the house, but at least I'm not bringing more chaos from my day in. And then everything goes a little bit better. And that was, and I was like, oh, you spent a lot of money on therapy just to learn how to breathe. But the reality is, right, but when we're able to be, that contagion of calm as a parent, as a leader on the sports team, right? As a leader in the school, as an educator in the school, as right, whoever you might be, right? You can actually infect the people around you with more calm so that they're feeling better and actually building their brain so it's more resilient to stress. So I'll just close there. Been about an hour. And happy to open it up for questions. I saw some folks with cameras. I'm happy to share all these slides also, so you don't have to take pictures, but you're welcome to if you want to. Email me. I'll put up my email as my shameless self-promotion. But my email is just chris@drchristopherwillard.com. You can Google me very easily. I probably got some business cards with me too.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Chris.
you.
We
Thank you all
appreciate
very
you
much.
being here. That was a great presentation.
And I want to say, again, sort of thank everybody, Anna and everybody else who did the work of bringing me here. I also just want to say to parents, it's never been a harder time to be a parent, and so keep up the good work. I want to say to kids, it's probably never been a harder time to be a kid. This is a really historically challenging moment for all of us in terms of mental health. Keep taking good care of yourselves, and thank you. And please stay in touch. Just shoot me an email if you want.